Welcome to NinjaCast, a photography podcast powered by Studio Ninja, the world's highest rated business management app, built specifically for photographers. Listen and learn as the most successful photographers on the planet share their knowledge to help you transform every element of your photography business. Here's your host, Sally Shaw.
Hi guys, welcome to another episode of NinjaCast. Today I'm joined by the lovely Anna Woods. Now Anna is a bit of a pro when it comes to doing 365 projects, personal passion projects and things like that. So I'm really excited to pick her brains today, see how 365 projects are going to help her business and why she thinks that you should consider doing a 365 for your own. Let's get started. Hi Anna, how are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good, I'm really good, thank you. Thank you so much for coming and talking to us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I hope I've got something useful to say.
Oh, I'm sure you will. I know the questions that are coming up, so it's going to be a great episode. And for our listeners that don't necessarily know who you are, what you do, can you give us a little introduction to yourself and your background in the industry?
Yeah, so I'm a wedding photographer and I'm based in West Yorkshire. And I shot my first wedding, oh my goodness, like over 10 years ago, maybe 11 years ago now, when I was studying photography. And at the time, I wanted to have a proper photography job, like a salaried photography job. So I was thinking I'd become like a medical photographer maybe, or maybe something in the police. And my friend was like, please shoot my wedding. And I was like, no, I don't want to do weddings. Like I want to do something like not just here and there and having to run my own business. Like I want like a job where I'm like given a salary every month. And anyway, she bent my arm, went to shoot this wedding, and I absolutely loved it and haven't really looked back since. It took a little while to get going with it full time, but I absolutely love being a wedding photographer.
And what did you do before photography?
Well, so I went to university to do geography.
Oh wow, quite a curveball.
Yeah, dropped out of that after a year, and I got an office job for the NHS, but this was before the NHS used computers. So my job was filing, lots of filing and pulling notes and more filing and answering the phone. And I just sort of thought one day I'd really like a creative outlet, just something to go do. So I was thinking I'd probably pick back up on textiles, which I'd studied at college, and instead found a photography night class and stole my dad's camera and went along to do that. And I absolutely loved it. It was monochrome photography, film photography in a dark room. So I walked in having never used a camera before in my life. I didn't know how. I remember trying to put a tripod up and like dropping it on my foot and like didn't know how to put film in, didn't know how to do anything, and I just absolutely loved it. I loved seeing like my photo come to life. I loved quite abstract stuff back then, and just being really, there was no one telling me what to do, because it was just like you just went away every week, shot what you wanted, develop the film, develop the images, and I just really loved it. So did some more studying and ended up on a foundation degree, and that was when I shot the wedding.
Fantastic. So, I mean, getting into today's episode a little bit then, now that we've got a bit of a background on you, 365 projects, or shooting a 365, is a bit of a passion project for you, isn't it? Something that you really enjoy doing. Now, I'll be totally honest, I've never done a 365. I know what they are, but the thought of it to me is like mind-blowing. I'm like, why do I even find the time? So first of all, Anna, introduce us to what a 365 is. How does it work? What do you have to do?
Okay, so, well, a 365 is quite a self-directed project, really. You can do it on anything, but the idea is that you take a photograph every single day for a year. Now, when I first heard of it, I was a bit like, I'll probably do that anyway. I could probably take a photo every day, even if it's just like taking a photo of like a receipt or like an interesting shaped bird poo or something. Like I'm always like, what's different about this? But the point is, I suppose it's an intentional project. You are intentionally going into it thinking, I'm going to take a photo every single day for a year. Like I say, you could do it on any subject. So I've seen people do them on, say, colour, and just every day is about going to take a photo of a different colour, or architecture, or light or anything. I just decided to just do mine based on my life. It actually started in lockdown for me. Sorry, I've just popped up on my screen and I'll just get rid of that. So the day lockdown started here, I'm assuming people listen to this all over the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm assuming you've got like massive audience. Yeah, so when lockdown started here in March 2020, obviously like every other wedding photographer out there, it was pretty awful. And my grandma also died the night that lockdown started.
Oh my
so I think I just had this thought of I kind of back similar to when I was 19 and in that office job, like I'm gonna have to do something, or I'm gonna go mad. So I just picked up my camera and started just kind of documenting our life in lockdown. So the first few weeks of those are pretty terrible because I was also using a little Sony camera that I bought, not my Canons that I was using at the time of shooting weddings. So a lot of blurry, horrible photos. I was trying to work out how to use this new system. And yeah, that was a challenge. 100 days in the same four walls with the same four people, trying to kind of create this interesting story about what we did while the world went weird. And I stopped that after 100 days. And then I just had the thought that I really wanted to try in 2021 to do it for 365 days, to do it for a whole year. And what I did, just started on the 1st of January and went right the way through to the 31st of December.
Wow, that's insane. I mean, to start that in lockdown, well, to start that anytime is a hell of an achievement, but to start that in lockdown, like you say, in the same four walls with the same four people, it's trying to find that inspiration, isn't it? Trying to keep the momentum going. So I mean, what are you've probably done it in the hardest possible scenarios. What are your tips for keeping the momentum, keeping your inspiration, keeping that want to do it?
I think for me, like I really wanted to document that period in our life, and it was probably easier in lockdown because I couldn't go out to work. I had two children that I was having to homeschool, and my husband's a teacher, so he was actually like working more, not less. So I think for me it was probably the easiest thing I did in lockdown. Like it was like, oh, we've got 4 hours this afternoon till tea time to, like, you know, till the next thing I need to do. What am I going to do with these children? And I'd be like, right, well, it's okay, I'm gonna get my camera out and we're going to go in the garden and I'm going to see what light I can find, or I'm going to see what interesting thing they do. So that was actually easier. The 365 in 2021 was much harder because when I can't remember what day it was in January, was it maybe like the 6th, we went back into lockdown. And only then that lockdown was very different to the 2020 lockdown. Well, I think the mood of the country was very different anyway, but the light was just awful. It was a lockdown through winter when we have about 2 hours of sunlight in Yorkshire in winter, and even then it's like covered in clouds. So it was like really, really hard. So I guess the inspiration then was kind of just a determination to how am I going to possibly make this look interesting when we are in lockdown in winter. I guess to keep inspired, I think it's just you've got to want to do it, and then got to find ways to keep it interesting, because it would be very easy to just take the same photo every single day, but actually you've got to watch films, read books, look at what other people are doing, follow the light around the house. I've done all sorts of things just to try and find something to take a photo of that day. Yeah,
it's trying to find the new ideas, which I mean, I guess not too dissimilar from, you know, entertaining your children during lockdown. Like, you know, every day it's, what am I going to do today? What exactly time to entertain them with?
I've just realised that I'm drinking out of the best dad ever cup.
Perfect.
Like, I wouldn't have taken the time to find a nice cup for this. Anyway, yeah, it is. I think one of the things I did was in lockdown, there's I don't know, group, would you call it? Called Flock. So Flock was supposed to have their first conference. Flock's a kind of organisation for female photographers around the world. It's amazing. It's run by Laura Wood. I absolutely love it. And I couldn't have gone to the conference because I had a wedding booked in, and then the world went crazy. But they took that online. So I did some classes, and there was this class by Chloe Lodge, who's based in New Zealand, and Cindy Kavanagh, who's in Australia, and they'd done a 365 project which they'd followed, had sort of a loop following on Instagram, and they sort of talked about how you need to really learn to read light. And I was a bit like, I've been a wedding photographer for years, like, I know how to read light, but actually reading light in the same 4 walls for 3 months is very different. So listening to these brilliant exercises just about sort of like literally logging the light in my house. Like I was wandering around with like a notebook, like the time and where the light was coming in and which direction it was going around the house. I mean, I kind of knew that already, but like to like exact degrees of when each room lost the light or when each room would have an interesting beam, and how that changed as the season like progressed as well. And I guess what that meant was that I could start to predict what the light was going to be like in each room, which meant I could purposefully sort of make sure we were in that light.
Yeah.
This is not a documentary project. I should probably put that out there. Like, I am not a staunch documentary photographer with this at all. It's more about a representation of our life for that year. So, like, for example, I had this idea that it would be really nice to do a puppet theatre with my kids one day, because we'd never done one, and I just thought that would look really cool on a photo. So I built a puppet theatre and then got them to play with it for a bit and took a photo. That wasn't a documentary because I knew where it was going, but it was a representation of what they did that day, because they did play with it. Or like another time, the rain had completely ruined our plans. So again, I was like, oh man, another dark day in the house. What am I going to take a photo of? And I was like, it really feels like a day to build a den. And my kids were like, what? Like, yeah, we're just going to build a den. And I mean, we had done it before, I'm sure. I mean, I failed as a parent if they hadn't built a den before that. We built a den, but again, the photo was in my mind as I was building the den. So I was thinking about, where's the light going to be, or what light am I going to add to this? You know, what angle am I going to be taking this from? So I guess that's something to keep the inspiration going, is just to, for me anyway, it's been to have ideas in my head. And I probably have a few days every week where I've got an idea of what I want to do, and the other days it's a bit more of a snapshot of like normal life, which I try and make a little bit interesting, but it doesn't always work.
Yeah, it's like keeping those creative juices flowing inside your mind, isn't it? Like if you've got something to plan and think about and, you know, preempt and think how that's going to be executed and how it's going to work, then all of a sudden, you know, all these ideas are coming to life and you can put that together.
And I think what I realized quite early on was, as a wedding photographer, somebody else makes a lot of the decisions for me before I arrive to do my job. So the clients have chosen the venue, they've chosen the colour scheme, they've chosen the guests, they've kind of set the vibe of the day, they've made the creative decisions for their day. I know as photographers we then go along and make other creative decisions, but with a project like this, I am absolutely the author of what the photos are going to be. And that was the first time in a long time that I'd thought, wow, I get to make these decisions. So that led to me like restudying things like colour theory, which I'd not looked at for a long time. But actually, when you're taking a photo every single day for a year, you've got to start thinking about how am I going to make these, you know, how am I going to make this interesting? What have I got to work with today? So like, for instance, there was one day we had a really blue sky here. So I'd started to think about like the colour theory, what could I use against that? And then took the kids to play with a kite, because I was like, that'll look really good against that blue sky because of the colour. So I think it's been really nice as a wedding photographer to just have a project where I am able to decide every day and make creative decisions to a different level than what I would at a wedding.
Yeah, definitely. It gives you total control, doesn't it? I love that. So, I mean, there must be days where, I mean, I know I would definitely have days if I tried to do a 365 where you just think, I don't want to do it today. Can't be bothered. I feel drained. I haven't got a clue what I want to do with it. That's just not. So, I mean, how do you overcome those days? Do you just shoot regardless? It's like, you know, there's a theory, isn't there, about going for a run? Like you can think that going for that run is going to be the worst thing in your life, but 5 minutes in, you're never going to regret going for a run.
Like
just kind of
generally I do try and just take something. So sometimes it gets like 11 o'clock at night and I'm like, I haven't taken anything. So I'll have to just try and find something. it's more if the children are poorly or if I'm poorly. Like I got pleurisy in September, which my, my friend was like, isn't that something people in Dickens novels get? I was like, yeah. No one's ever heard of it, but it was basically where the lining of your lungs swells up. It's incredibly painful, and I was on like codeine for a week. I was just totally out of it for like those 7 days.
Yeah.
I did have to give myself like some grace at that point. Like it's okay if these photos, if I think I had a few days where I just couldn't have even picked up the camera, you know, and so I had to. But I talked about that in my 365. You know, that's part for me. That's part of the story. So if there's been a time like that, you know, I've been quite I share everything on Instagram, and I've made like an album of the photos as well, you know, and I'll share that and be like, well, actually today I couldn't take a photo because I was totally knocked out by codeine. So
yeah, definitely.
The other thing I've done is a few times in wedding season, I had like back-to-back weddings, and it wasn't really very easy. So I try and get a photo of my second shooter, or I might try and get a photo, like a selfie of myself with my camera like in my break, or like one wedding, a photo of like a bumblebee on a flower, because I was just like, there's nothing else I'm going to be able to do today. Like I might have driven a few hours and done like a 12-hour day and had a few hours to drive back. So if I really, really didn't manage it, what I do is take a photo a few days later, but that represented that day. So, for example, there was a day when my daughter really, really wanted like a really long dress. She was 6 at the time, and she's really into Victorians, and she just really, really wanted a dress that touched the floor, like a summer dress. And I finally managed to find her one, but it was when she was in bed. So like I wrote her a little note, like, because I was going straight out to a wedding next morning, saying like, I really hope you love this dress. I love you lots. Send me a photo of you in it. Like, so I took a photo of that a few days later, the note, because it represented that day. So it's very self-guided with the 365. I think no one is looking over your shoulder saying, you did not take a photo today, you have failed. Like, it is self-driven. No one is judging you, and you can make those decisions. The other thing is there's a project called a 52 project, which is just one photo a week, which I know like a few of my friends have done that before taking on a 365, so that they've sort of dipped their toes into it without the full-on commitment of a 365. But for me, I think like more than 9 times out of 10, I will take a photo every single day, unless there is a circumstance like illness or like travel or whatever that means I can't. I mean, like we broke down on our way on holiday in the summer, and my photo for that day was the photo of the engine.
Oh, bless you.
Or I was like, I haven't taken anything else. And while we were like stood with the bonnet open, like waiting to get help, I was like, I'm just gonna take a photo of the engine, because that, you know, so it doesn't, not every day is going to be the most creative and amazing piece of art that you ever made. Some days will just be a ridiculous snapshot of your life.
Yeah, definitely. Fantastic. So I mean, finding balance, I mean, we've already kind of talked about giving yourself grace, having days, you know, and it's okay to have days where you don't necessarily do it. I mean, 365 days nonstop is a hell of a commitment, but balancing kind of, you've already mentioned, you know, your business, your weddings, the 365 project, your family, your children. How do you balance all of that? It's a hell of a juggling act.
Yeah. I think actually when you get talking to people, there's a lot of people who are photographers who have like multiple businesses and families, and I think it's probably really common that we all feel a bit like, how do we fit everything in? When my kids were little, I set up like a little traffic light system, which I found really helpful. So red jobs were the ones I couldn't do with the children around, so that might be like a phone call that was like really important that wouldn't be okay if they were like, Mom, can I have a biscuit? Orange jobs were like ones that would be all right if I had to do them, like I could put the film on for them and, you know, give them a biscuit and get away with it. I'm mentioning biscuits a lot. And green jobs were things I could do with the children, like going to the post office or scouting out a venue. Not that I do that anymore, actually, but in the early days, if I wanted to go see a venue, the kids would go with me. So I think that's something that I've kind of now do subconsciously. So I have some things even though they're older now, they're 9 and 7, but I have some things that I will do with them around, some things that I know that I have to get done while they're at school because that isn't suitable to do around them, or it's too important to do around them. And I have jobs that are in between as well, and now they're older, it's quite nice. I could be a little bit like, I really need just half an hour, so I'm just going to shut the door and you just stay in there half an hour and then we'll do XYZ, which is more fun. But I love it. I love that when I worked 9 to 5, I would, if I'd carried on doing that, I wouldn't have been able to ever do the school run. I wouldn't have ever been able to be there before and after school. And I feel really like privileged that I get to do that, like really, really lucky. And I think for me, I chose a 365. I've seen so many amazing personal projects. I think lockdown's brilliant for some photographers finding personal projects, probably more perhaps for photographers who weren't homeschooling. But I saw some like brilliant projects of sort of people in isolation and what they did and things like that. And then I've seen other projects since that are very elaborate. So it might involve taking a light somewhere and maybe like to a nightclub and taking photos of people as they arrive at a nightclub, for example. That might be like a personal project, like documenting the time that we live in. Well, for me, that wouldn't work because I can't do something where I'm committing a lot of time to going somewhere. I just don't. I've got like 6 hours while they're at school. It wouldn't, and I need to run my business, so that wouldn't work. So I think a 365 is like a brilliant project if you're short of time, because it can take 30 seconds a day, it can take 3 hours a day. You can put into it the time that you've got. Whereas more of like a project that involved other people and wasn't about your life, I think would take potentially more time and more planning. So I just think it works well, but it's a good project to be creative and do something for yourself. And as wedding photographers, I know for me, I'd stopped shooting for myself a long time ago because weddings just took priority over everything. And it's been really nice to just completely do something that's self-driven and for no particular reason. I'm actually in my first few weeks, I remember writing in Flock, actually, I was like, how do I know if I've taken a good photo? How do I know if this is any good? Because when I shoot for a wedding, people will say, we love the photos, or like people will comment on the Instagram, oh, this is so cool, or whatever. When you're shooting for yourself, there's no one you're trying to please. There's no tick box you need to tick. It's just, do you like it? So I think it was a really big learning curve for me to just be like, do I like this? Do I like how this is shot? Is this a good photo? Actually, it doesn't matter if anybody else thinks it's a good photo. Nobody else even needs to see this photo. So I think that's it's just a really good project. I think I've gone off on a bit of a tangent. I'm really sorry.
No, not at all. I think it's really good to kind of cover these things because, you're so right, especially, as a wedding photographer myself as well. But, as any genre of photography, really, you get so drawn into your job. And, we all started this because we enjoy taking photos. We enjoy being a photographer. There was something about it that caught our eye and you thought, I could do that. I enjoy this.
Yeah.
I shot my first wedding ever and came home from it and went, well, I'm never doing that again.
Really?
Yeah. I literally came home, was exhausted beyond belief, and just felt, I think, just drained from, you're constantly firing on all cylinders. I guess when you're new as well, even more. It's second nature now after so many years. But I vividly remember coming home and saying, I wouldn't do that again if my life depended on it. And here we are, like 9 years later, full time. And but no, I always recall that story because it's funny how things shift. From what your first perspective was. Yeah,
definitely.
So, going back to the 365, I'm off on a tangent now. Going back on a 365, it's great for that personal belief, that personal value. Yeah. Do you think it benefits your business in any way? Does it give value to your clients?
Definitely. I think as photographers, wedding photographers particularly, in fact, so one thing I haven't mentioned is that in the pandemic, I went back to university to finish my degree. Yeah. So that was 8 or 9 years after I'd done my foundation degree. And what I really enjoyed about that was actually like that the tutors didn't really have a wedding background, and it kind of fitted in quite nicely with what I was looking at with the 365, because I started to look not at wedding photographers. In fact, I stopped looking at wedding photographers for a while. And I think as wedding photographers, we can be very much just only being inspired by each other, then the work is going to become very similar. So doing something like a 365 means that I was looking at like paint-based artists, sculptors, different things. I was looking to a lot of films for inspiration. Like my husband just must hate watching things with me, because I just sit through like a crime thriller. There can be like a gruesome murder going on. I'd be like, oh, but it's shot really nicely, isn't it? Birds are just on, and like that colour contrast, like it's just lovely, that light. And you'll just be like, oh,
for God's sake, just watch the film.
Just watch it. In fact, recently he's been like, oh, look at that shot. And I'm like,
you're doing it now.
I do think that because I am having to come up with interesting things of my kids to take photo and my lives, and try and make it, I want to really push myself that when I look back on these photos of my family, they're not just going back to what I said in the beginning, oh, I took photos of my kids on my phone today. That isn't the point of it. In fact, a lot of the photos of my children don't have their faces on. It's because I want to tell a story, not always with their faces on. I'm quite conscious that getting older, I don't necessarily want a lot of photos out there of their faces. So I might look at how I'm using shadows. I've got a bit of a theme of taking photos of their feet as well. But I feel like a big story. What, like one of my favorite photos I did of them last year was there was one of the parks near us got revamped, and they had some new, like, the spongy flooring. It's probably got like a technical name, but the spongy flooring put down, and they put a rainbow pattern into it, and I was like, just run on that rainbow pattern. You're running around anyway. I was like, yeah, just run that way, then we'll go get an ice cream. And it's just a photo of their feet at the end of this rainbow. But like for me, I could have just took a photo of them like on the swing or whatever, just a normal snapshot. But it was about, how can I tell this story more interestingly? Is interestingly a word?
It is, absolutely.
Yes. It is. Yeah, so then if I'm looking at a wedding, those skills just absolutely come with me. Right, I've got this safe photo, and I'd heard people talk about it before, and I probably had done it to some extent, but I do feel now like I push myself a lot more to just, without even thinking about it, to think, how am I going to more interestingly get this photo? Have I looked at what hands are doing? If there's a bit of a lull in bridal prep, I'll be thinking, right, well, everybody's, it's quite chill right now. What are everybody's feet doing? What are their hands doing? What's the light doing? And what direction is the light going in? And it has absolutely had a big impact, I think, on how I shoot. I still do a lot of the same things, but I think it's really added to like my toolbox of like, not even knowledge, because I think I knew a lot of it, but like second sense, that's not a word, is it?
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's like, as wedding photographers, we don't say like, you have your safe shots, you have the shots that are expected of you by the couple. There's kind of a silent industry standard, isn't there, that these are the shots that you would expect. But then I think, like, with a 365, I can totally see that would push you, once you've got your safe shots, that actually more naturally you would go for things that are a bit more risque, a bit more out there, a bit more abstract, a bit more different, because you're kind of coaching your brain into thinking that way.
Yeah, definitely. And I also think that I now want to get something that's different. It's like not just I could do something a bit, it's what am I going to do that, I don't want this to sound big-headed, I don't mean it like that at all, but what would I do that another photographer might not do in this venue? And perhaps that's a good mindset for us like all to be in, to stay unique.
Challenging yourself, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Like there was one venue I was at this year, and had like miles of gorgeous gardens and like loads of space. I don't usually do a lot of portraits anyway, but we went for a little walk, and so I ignored all the beautiful gardens after I'd got like a few nice shots. And my absolute favorite thing was I found this like wall, and it was just like a normal wall, but it had loads of texture on it, and it had some vines growing up it, and it was like the back of obviously where the gardener just used to kind of dump his things. So there was a wheelbarrow like standing up. It's just like rubbish around, some random like barrels. And I was like, yeah, just stand there. I need you to stand there. And then I just was like, I want you to look like, pretend this isn't weird. I want you to look like this is like a Victorian scene, because I just think this juxtaposition idea has become quite a big thing in my 365 as well. So I was like, I just want this bit of a juxtaposition of this like really beautifully dressed couple, almost in like a Victorian portrait stance amongst like the chaos of this like garden. And the couple, she said to me since, like, I had no idea what you were asking us to do. But I really love it, and I'm like, yeah, and I know that I wouldn't have done that for the 365. I maybe wouldn't have had the confidence to be able to look at that and see things like the texture and the color and the light in the way that I do now.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely shapes, I think, how you approach a wedding. And like you said, your confidence, you know, a lot of the time we're conditioned to go for the safe shots. We're conditioned to go for the shots that are expected of us. And it's so possible to be able to bring in, you know, your passion projects, bring in that little bit of a challenge to yourself as a photographer while still capturing somebody else's wedding day.
Really?
Love that. So, I mean, we've spoken a hell of a lot about 365 projects now. I've actually learned quite a lot, because I knew what a 365 was. There's loads of kind of answers there that have kind of pinged questions off in my head. So we've gone off on a huge tangent, but it's all good. Anna, who inspires you and why, as a photographer, as a mum, as a business owner? Who are your inspirations?
Wow. Okay. I think as a photographer, I like to look outside photography. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, I'm not very good with names. Okay. That's really bad. I'm not going to be like so and so inspires me. I think I just like feel quite, films I find really inspiring, like the way they're shot, and it just, I love light now. So I think walking through a city and just seeing a light and that kind of thing. I love taking my daughter to the art gallery. We go quite a lot. Then we go to the Leeds one because it's like a really nice tea room as well.
Got to be done. Cake and tea at the end.
If there's cake at the end, then I'm there. But I just love now just going and kind of picking apart how those artists have really nailed the shadows and the light and the color. Like I look at things completely differently to how I did before. Yeah, and I think anyone who does a 365 project I just find really inspiring, probably because I know how hard it is. And often for me it's not really like the massively well-known photographers. It'll be like my friends. I've got a little buddy group, 365 friends, and like I just find them so inspiring. And like they'll just like randomly on like a Wednesday lunchtime when I'm like cooking tea, I'll get this like beautiful photo come up in the 365 group, and my friend will be like, oh yeah, I just played with like double exposure with this reflection and this of my face this afternoon. I'd just be like, whoa, that's like amazing that you've just done that this afternoon. I just think that's like really, really inspiring, and I really
love that. That's fantastic. It's great. I think it's great to be inspired by the people around you rather than looking up to this big famous photographer or somebody that,
a lot of imposter syndrome if I look up to the big people. Not that I don't want to look to like my friends as well, but I like that my friends will be like, oh, I did this, and then they'll kind of like be like happy to talk through how they got there, which I really enjoy that, because that really again challenges me to think, oh, I wonder if there's part of that I could use in my project. Whereas I think if I look to the big photographers, I'd just be like, oh, I've got no idea how they do that. Like,
absolutely, I hear you, definitely.
I like people who share how they get things.
Absolutely, no secrets. So if you could start your career all over again, Anna, is there anything that you would change?
I'd do a 365 way earlier. I think there's a bit of a feeling you've got to have like kids to do a 365 as well. I meant to mention that earlier, and I think that it really, really doesn't need to be about your life. Like I say, it could be, I wish I'd done something maybe around like just walking the streets around where I lived when I walked the dog. Like I saw a brilliant project. Actually, she's not a photographer. She's an artist in Manchester, and she just likes to take photos of inner city Manchester where she lives, just random things that like make her smile, make her like, so like there's and random faces that she finds. So like, you know, an object has kind of a face because of part of it might be positioned to make like eyes, and I love things like that. So I wish I'd done something like that earlier, and or just kept personal projects going. Oh gosh, there's so much advice I give myself if I went back. I think not to look to other wedding photographers. I think like what we said about those kind of like perceived like safe shots, I think I'm trying to do it more and more now, to let them go and just do in the way and the style that I want to. But I wish that I could go back perhaps and tell myself not to worry about shooting what everyone else is shooting and kind of go on my own like journey with it. But perhaps it's more, now we're in 2022, I think wedding photography is in a really interesting place, that things aren't as expected of you as they were when I shot my first wedding in 2011, when it was still very much you require a photo of the hands and
on the bouquet. Definitely.
People still want them. I just mean it's not anymore there's not this, you have to do that. And I think if anyone's starting out now, I would like really embrace that. In 2022, you can shoot a wedding however you want, as long as you can find clients who like it too. You just go for it.
I love that. Fantastic. If our listeners would like to find out more about you, connect with you, get in touch with you, how can they do that, Anna?
So my personal project is on Instagram, and then it's just at the Woods Stay Home, because I set it up in lockdown.
Love that.
I love how I could nostalgic. And my wedding work is just again at Instagram at Anna Wood Photography. It's really boring, but is what it is.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for giving up a bit of your time today and coming and chatting with us. I've absolutely loved it. I've learned a shed load, so I'm sure everybody else will have done. And hopefully we can catch up again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Absolute pleasure. I'll see you soon, Anna. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, guys, that's everything from me today. Thank you so much again to Anna for coming and joining us on the show and covering all things 365. If you'd like to see the show notes, you can head to www.studioninja.co/episode 53. Please, as always, don't forget to rate us on the podcast platform that you're listening on. A little bit of love goes a very long way. I'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of NinjaCast, brought to you by Studio Ninja. Beautifully designed and super easy to use, Studio Ninja will help you manage your leads, clients, shoots, invoices, contracts, workflows, and so much more. To learn more or start your 30-day free trial, go to www.studioninja.co.